Greetings and salutations, friends. Thank you for joining me on a new episode of Tarot Journal. It is I, your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, picking up where I left off absent-mindedly in a crossover episode of Cannabis Talk. We've been welcoming some new decks, mostly to just get them processed and into the collection before I really get serious onto the main body of the study, the work involved of learning tarot. But yesterday, when I was recording last, I think it was a live episode. Might have been a draft, but in the middle of Cannabis Talk, I was like, "Fuck it, let's open this deck." It's a cool deck. For those of you who didn't catch that episode, I'm currently looking at The Law of Attraction, a 36-card oracle by Amy Zerner and Monte Farber. It's a lovely little box. I really like the art so far. It's a combination of like a modern aesthetic and a bit of like a retro, vintage, 1800s or late 20s kind of vibe. Kind of just vintagey. But the art is, I don't know, the art on the cover, it's really Victorian. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay, so the deck has a lovely back, which is a watercolor. Oh, and it's different on every card. Check that out. So the back of every card, I did not notice right at my first glance. The back of every card has a keyword and a specific image, each of which is beautifully illustrated in a kind of like print illustration meets graphic novel kind of vibe. It's really neat. It's like it kind of feels almost like it's hand drawn, but it's also mixed media. So I don't know. It's pretty. They're very pretty. It's got keywords, the backs, mind you. I've got keywords like motivation, instincts, respect, universe, grounding, magnetism, generosity, etc. So, a bunch. The very first card at the top of the deck that I looked at that I thought was like just the primer for the deck is called Flow, the primer. I thought it was going to be like the default for the whole deck. And the background is a lovely underwater watercolor-like scene of 4 fish and a seahorse, and what might be an amoeba thing, a plant, and then other kind of rocks and plants and things. Oh, there's 5 fish. One was camouflaging over there in the corner. So all right, let's look at the front of the card. Flow. Now the front of the card has text. Riches flow into my life in many ways and forms. Riches flow into my life in many ways and from many directions. Okay, so these are like first-person perspective mantra-style readings. So as a quick welcome, I'm going to shuffle the deck. And a quick note, anybody who's new to the show and hasn't listened to me already rant about shuffling, let me give you my quick shuffle rant. Oracle cards, tarot decks, anything of this nature, any system of this nature is not, a playing deck that you would play casino poker with. You don't casino shuffle your Oracle deck. Mostly because at the size and scale that they're at, you'll likely just damage them. Most decks, the way they're constructed, most Oracle decks, the way they're constructed, you could gently arc shuffle them, or bridge shuffle them, or poker shuffle them, as different people call it. But the bigger the deck, the more likely you're just going to, bend a card. And second of all, it's just, I don't know, the energy about it. There's something, and that's weird, right? You'd think it's a neutral, benign action, but there's something about it that doesn't read right. It's like, not everybody likes getting their hair pulled when they're getting kinky, right? Not everyone's idea of adult time in the bedroom involves getting spanked. But no kink shaming here. Also, no kink exploitation here. no kink sensualization. What's the word? I hate it when words are close but kind of stuck because they're being confused by another word. Anyways, when you hype something. I digress. So, shuffling. The simplest and best way to shuffle is like the side shuffle. Take the deck, and it's easier with pictures, right? But I'm working through radio here, as it were, folks, because like my mom always said, you've got a voice for radio and a face for comedy. You take any given deck. I've got this deck, this Law of Attraction deck, and I've got my thumb along the bottom edge, the thumb of my right hand along the bottom edge, my two middle fingers along the top edge of the deck. I've got the back of the deck facing my left palm, and I'm letting a couple of cards slide into that hand and catching them, and then stopping, and then letting a couple of cards slide in front of that and stopping, and then I flip that bundle over, not flip it, but just kind of tip it over so that it's leaning the other direction against my thumb. Drop a couple cards, tip it so that the bulk of the new pile is leaning against my fingers. Drop a couple cards, and you do that, and you get better and better at it. The first time I did it, a bunch of cards fell out, and I started to pick them up, and I was with someone that reads and said, "Hey, that's enough for a reading." And I said, "What?" And they're like, yeah, those jumped out. They want to be read. And it was like 3 cards. And so I stopped shuffling, and we put those cards. They had fallen to, like, the floor, which was embarrassing because I was just a big klutz. But it's okay. Like, don't freak out about your cards being on the floor. I generally prefer, out of treating the objects with reverence and treating them with respect as tools for divine work. They themselves are not divine, right? Let's not get things confused. The divinity is not sourced in any one deck or in any one artist's intention. The divinity flows through any human individual who chooses to tap into that and share art that divinity wants to share. So, but I do, out of respect and treating the object with reverence, I do generally refuse to put or deal them on the floor without some sort of mat, which we can talk about that sort of thing in depth in another episode, but prefer to use a clean table surface. I tend to, even though I don't read for people, I'm preparing myself, I'm practicing the act of just having the impulse, the thought, the intuition, like the awareness to like, oh, do I want to bring a deck? Do I want to bring a box of decks? And having my gear kind of prepped as if I'm staged and ready to deploy, right? I've got my travel mat and then my special extra magic mat, which I'm debating whether or not will be a travel mat. But, I've got a basic piece of cloth gifted to me from the theater. It was a leftover piece of, what's it called? Oh, man, the words are coming slow and molassesy today. Black Duvetine. We use mountains and mountains worth of black Duvetine in the theater, and because theater is what it is, sometimes chunks of it just like are such a size, just small enough to be useless. And people are like, well, we could use it as a rag or we could save it for something, but generally we chuck it for recycling. And sometimes, on occasion, because I am a reuser, right? I love to upcycle. I love to reuse objects that have already been dutifully put to good use and are otherwise in danger of being thrown away. The back of one card. Now, this is an interesting thing as I completely sidestep myself in the middle of discussion. Oh, to wrap that up, so this piece of fabric was gifted to me by the theater because it was otherwise scrap that was going to get chucked. And it was just the right size. I had to trim it just a little bit. In fact, I might have another go at trimming it just a little bit because it's a little off kilter. But once I've got it just right, I want to stitch it up so it doesn't unravel. And then I'm just going to use that as a travel mat, a travel, temple scarf, whatever you want to call it. A travel silk. It's not silk, it's Duvetine. So then I got excited about something. It was one of the interesting things about the design choices on the back of a card, right? Why do decks of cards in general, have uniform backs that are intricate, complicated design, usually some sort of knotwork or grill work or, some kind of graphic repeating pattern. There it is. Come back to you. You stood out. Okay, so this is not the first time I've encountered a deck in which the backs of the cards are not unique. And the thing about that is that then sometimes, because if they're not unique, then you can kind of build associations, right? You can relate, oh, that image or this figure or that shape is this card, and I'll always know when it's coming because I'll see it in the shuffle, and So just now, as I was rambling about various things and shuffling over and over again, one card, the rest of them look like a blur because I'm like, I haven't learned them, I haven't connected, I haven't laid eyes on them enough. But one card just had an iconic enough figure built into its imagery that it just kept standing out very sharply, as opposed to all of the rest of them being kind of like, my brain hasn't decoded them yet, so I don't know what to recognize, so I see sort of an unrecognizable blur with vague shapes and color and whatnot. And also I wasn't, but this card stood out. So because it did so 3 times, 3 different occasions, it picked up, it like just hooked my attention as I was randomly shuffling. So it came up, and akin to when cards just jump out of a deck, like I was saying about the very, very first time I shuffled a deck for myself. Ever since that day, I've always tried to honor the notion of cards jumping. So if I was hoping a card would jump, and this, what I'm pointing out with the back kind of standing out, is the closest thing. So a card didn't pop out. Sometimes they do. I'll be shuffling. I'll be, not doing it in a clumsy way, and one card will just be like plop. I'm like, I need to hit the table. So this card didn't quite do that, but it has on the back of it a Buddha, a very serious little Buddha man, drawn, sitting in a humble outdoor natural space. And the sun is very big and close, and there's also like some reeds or some leafy planty things growing that as it was moving, it gave that circular shape behind the tree a kind of sacred geometry mandala image shape. But it was the little Buddha guy, like there's just a cross-legged, bald Asian man with his hands in a traditional mudra. I didn't see the word at the time, but I just saw the little Buddha guy like pop out in like high def. So here he is. The word is patience, and the mantra or the text on the face of the card is, I am patient, persistent, and disciplined in pursuing my goals. And if I understand the fundamental mechanics, thank you, deck. I honor that reading. Thank you. If I understand the basic, fundamental, underlying, like theoretical mechanics behind the general idea that is the secret or the law of attraction, and as I read on my previous episode, sorry I didn't include that today, but as I read in my previous episode, where I, in the middle of lounging and rambling about a bunch of different things, decided to go ahead and just open this deck. I'm going to put this, I had ended up debating whether or not to put this deck's little white book, which is actually printed on a sheet of half uncut cards, right? It's like, they're clearly the same exact shape. But they were like the bottom row, so it's 4 cards that along their side axis or side edges didn't get cut, they got bent. So it's a little, 1, 2, 3, 4 page pamphlet with 8 sides on it, and it's accordioning. And I was debating where to put it, and I want to keep it in my little black magic bag of quantum entanglement. But because I haven't read the book, and I'm not about to like read it on the show, because I think that would be dangerously close to violating too blatantly their rights and privileges for owning this intellectual property. But I'm going to keep it temporarily with the card, because when I need to read it in parts of my offline, off-show preparations, right? And then I need to know its little black book, so I'm going to put it in with the deck. But the next time I come around to using it, I'll have read the black book and transferred it over to the little quantum Entanglement Magic Bag. And if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about with that, you should dip into the most recent Cannabis Talk episode, or I think maybe I rambled about it in the last Tarot Journal episode. But that went really quick. I didn't have that much to ramble about. So, it's going to be a double whammy episode. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Which deck do I want to introduce next? I think we're going to go with this one because I kind of had finally settled on an order. So, and there was a bit of a synchronicity theme. The last deck was Law of Attraction. I'm going to put this box up on the shelf. Up on the shelf you go, my friend. Welcome to the collection. So the next box I have, as of right now, my standing unopened collection now consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. The next box is Divine Energy Oracle. So it's an oracle. It's about the mysterious ways that the universe works, which the law of attraction and the secret, anchors its whole, reasoning, its whole methodology into divine energy, and the principle that whether it's consciousness or not, the mysterious forces in the universe apply and work for us when we consciously choose to delegate tasks to them. And it's not that we can magically get things done or acquire objects without any work being done. It's that when we apply work plus the sort of mental effort of focused psychological magical tools, right? To use the word magical tools in a pragmatic sense, not in a dismissive, it's malarkey sense, but it's something available to us, but we just aren't very familiar or very comfortable with it because we aren't allowed to study it very much, right? It's all marginalized and kicked off to the side. And we're allowed to have our little fringe businesses, but it can't be something that the mainstream media takes seriously and discusses, and that we as a nation rally around, right? But maybe that's slowly changing, with politicians like Marianne Williamson breaking the spiritual glass ceiling of spiritualists in politics. It's funny, we pat ourselves on the back, collectively speaking, as a nation about this separation of church and state, but we are very intolerant, collectively speaking. I mean, many people are very welcoming, don't get me wrong. I just mean, as a whole, there's clearly resistance to the idea of people of faith that are not Christian being in politics. It just gets a little edgy. Even wishy-washy, they don't remember what the hell variety of Christians get a little wonky. And they're usually pretty chill and down to coexist with other people. Speaking of which, real life, interjection. Have you seen the Coexist bumper sticker? It's been around for decades now. It is comprised of, I'm going to tell you the story as I unwrap the Divine Energy Oracle, which is made by, or the author or creator's name on the box is Sonia Choquette. Chocolate? It almost looks like it should be chocolate, but it's Choquette. Forgive me for not being able to pronounce it correctly, Sonia. It is published by Hay House, another strong and well positioned publisher of tarot and other oracle decks and spirituality books. But yeah, so I was driving on the freeway and it was a bit of traffic. And I, the Coexist the Coexist bumper sticker is one of those things that it kind of stands out because my mind, appreciates it. And so, when you really like a certain color of car and you've just discovered it, you see a lot more of that color of car. You just register it more. When you buy a silver car, you see silver cars everywhere. When I bought a purple Scion XB, or rather, well, that's a personal story. That's a whole other thing. I won't get into it now. But when I got a purple Scion XB, I suddenly saw all the Scions XBs, the boxy-ass little cars that I had, noticed when they first started hitting the road, but then acclimated to and just started ignoring, because your brain does that. You have to filter out stuff that either consciously and or unconsciously you've determined to be irrelevant data, right? But whenever your brain gets excited about potentially relevant data, you sometimes tune into it and start identifying it. So I see, because my brain likes to pick out and identify that the cars that have the coexist button. Now I saw this is a new one on me, and excuse me, I've got the hiccups. I'm gonna edit that out in post. Now I've got to burp too. Great. Wow. I'm such a professional host. What was I saying? Okay, so my brain goes, hey, look, a coexist bumper sticker. And I looked and I thought, this is my conscious brain was like, neat, thanks. Something's not right about that bumper sticker. And there was, along the C and O of coexist, like a splash of blood red. And at first my brain was like, that must be a flaw in the printing, or it got ripped, or it got stained, or and I was like, I'm gonna wait and see if I creep up next to this car. It was one lane over to my left, so perfect, right? So that if timing worked out right and I kept my eyes vigilant for it, I'd be able to take a good close look at it, nice and slow. And I did eventually, and it's a counterattack to the coexist bumper sticker. It's an evil parody or a nefarious parody. And I say evil and nefarious not to disrespect people who think this way, but rather because I think this kind of thinking has its origins in the cloud of psyop mind control activities designed to perpetuate an admiration, a love for, a support for the military-industrial complex, the division and divide agendas of race war and religious war, and general war profiteering. So it says coexist, but the religious icons are altered to all have guns in them, I think, except maybe the Christian one. That may have been an overread on my part. I didn't have that much time to really look deep at it. But the blood red was blood. I mean, not real blood, but, a print choice. It was a graphic design choice to represent blood. And in small, almost unreadable letters, almost illegible letters, underneath the word coexist, it said, with other religions or groups of people, I don't remember now, that want to kill you. Now, you don't have to be trying to extrapolate a conclusion or a third sentence on purpose, consciously, in order to get the implication or the implied third sentence, right? Question mark? If there's an agenda of nefarious powers, whatever their loci, their locations, or their identities may be, they most definitely want you full of rage, ready to shoot first and ask questions or even think later, and not at all interested in healing one another. That's why I'm overtly interested in delving deeply into normal, everyday, real-life things that provide opportunities for healing. Some of you will have already noticed that I've finally sort of, it's like 98% done. I say 98% done because I still want to go through and give several episodes in the middle of Volume 1 of my show a little bit of sprinkle in some music because I hadn't had time, right? And my whole process is very much like you're witnessing the rough draft and then the rough edit and then the updrafting and then the final edit as part of the show. Like I'll post an episode that's not ready as opposed to wait and put it in a queue and tell it, and then until I have time to get to it and do all the edits and all the fun tweaks that I could build into something, adding music here and a little bit of ambiance and atmosphere there, etc. That's one of the things I want to play with later, by the way. I'm openly acknowledging that, I'm down to audio design my shows and make them sound like I'm at the beach when I'm not, or whatever, right? For example, the music episodes that now end cap the beginning and the bookend, the beginning and the end. Oh, hold on a second. All right, that was music brought to you by my LG7 phone and its alarm clock. Thank you, LG7 alarm clock, for a lovely, soothing, easy to wake up to alarm track that I forgot to turn off before starting this rough draft recording of this episode. So, to finish that story up and take a hot second to turn off any other possible alarms that might go off in the next several minutes, I was like flabbergasted on the freeway. I was just like, wow, military industrial complex, way to like fight back the unity and the solidarity and the collaborative coexistence that we were trying to build there with that idea of coexisting. And it's brutal, right? Because if you really, really think about it, it ain't new. That goes back to the Tower of Babel, yo. And to tie it all together, to bring it all back, so does the wide-ranging and often very varying generalized practice of oracle consultation in order to prime the mind to receive intuitively guided divine wisdom. Now, I've talked at length about why I think that might work and why I think it's worth investigating. So here we are. I'm not going to ramble about that again. But here we go. To send a brief prayer of realization, join me in, and I know this is kooky and spiritual, hoo-hoo, new age woo-woo nonsense sounding, but if you're listening and you're even remotely open to the idea of spiritual energy work, join me in a brief moment of sending some healing, love, forgiveness, compassion, empathy, and eye-opening frequencies. You don't have to know what those numbers are. They probably have specific numbers, but does it matter? No. Does your mind know how to visualize sending love? Yes. So do that. Visualize sending love, a packet of energy full of love and all those other words I just used at anyone. But specifically this person I saw, whoever they may be, because I didn't find out, right? I didn't write down their license plate. I'm not a creeper. But anyone who may have that bumper sticker, that bloodied, fear-mongering, us versus them, gotta shoot them all before they shoot us all, let God figure out who's worth killing and not, bumper sticker. May they have an aha moment about how manipulated they are being manipulated, like how manipulated their life is getting by the military-industrial complex, trying to keep them working in favor of supporting divisive, conflict-causing, we got to shoot them or they're going to shoot us mentality. Thank you for doing that. Slowly but surely, people are waking up to the bullshittery, friends. So, divination, divinatory practices, consulting objects, inanimate objects, to get insight into the divine. Nothing new here, folks. Nothing new at all. And maybe, quite a lot to see. Let's find out. Let's continue to explore, nice and gentle, with lots of patience, as that last deck reminded me and us to always work with patience, right? Let's take a moment to say hello and welcome to the Divine Energy Oracle, whose cover I really like. It's got both a modern and a classic feel. I like that crossover vibe of this is vintage, but it's also very new. I dig that. I'm going to take a quick toke, folks, because this is a day off. I've got nowhere to go, no work to do. No one's going to pay me to do shit today, so I can smoke weed. So Sonia dedicates this deck to her children who, quote, have been my greatest teachers so far. And I gotta say, I've never had kids, but if there's a fun, interesting life lesson that I have picked up by observing kids, by working with kids professionally, by, raising my own sibling, who was, many years my junior, and helping my mom and being taught by my own mom about taking care of kids, raising them, addressing their needs, etc. And being a professional male nanny for one period of time. That statement is a beautiful truth that is so easy to forget. Children are many things at once. And we can use a lot of words there, right? But one thing they are, divinely, until they stop being so because we've taught them too much and they now become something else, or they focus their energy somewhere else. They are teachers, divine teachers. Never forget that. And the lessons are tricky and hard and sneaky and bizarre and not what you expect at all, ever. Okay, so to read briefly from the introduction, this oracle card deck is designed to connect you with divine energy, the part of you answering the deepest, most profound personal questions that we all share. And that's fundamentally true, too. There's a lot of fear-mongering about oracle divination and decks and whatnot, especially from the intolerant religious right. Meanwhile, Jesus preached, love everyone, treat everyone like you're equal because they are you. Ooh, something I like to talk about on and off whenever this subject comes up. Don't take my word for it. Look up the ancient word Shem, S-H-M. I think it's ancient Hebrew. It might be ancient Aramaic. It might be cuneiform. I don't remember which. The ancient texts all went through phases of being one or two of those three languages, so it's muddied in my head. I am not an archaeologist, but I know that this following is true. Shem, the original wording, and I've said this before quite recently, but I'll say it again because it resonates right here. The original wording of the biblical passage, treat others like you would want to be treated yourself, is actually treat others as you treat your Shem. And what is your Shem? Your higher self, your soul, your divine spark, your facet of the divine being, the light of God within you and within everybody else. I digress. So from a little bit further on in the introduction, these cards are for those who are serious about waking up to your divine nature and eliminating all obstacles to peace of mind and spiritual growth. Cool. There are several ways to use the deck. Shuffle the cards, pull a card whenever you want to seek guidance. Another method is to do a 3-card layout. Pretty standard advice, pretty usual things. The introduction closes with the following paragraph, and I'll leave it there. Your divine invitation, be honest about what is not working in your life and know it is time to change this reality. You will receive guidance in how to successfully improve. Excuse me 1 second. It's like first cup of the morning hiccups, Okay. You will receive guidance in how to successfully improve this if you are receptive and willing. Rest assured rest assured that this guidance will soon come. So then it goes into each of the cards. Cool. That's a lovely book. This book is a standard sort of like, it's a mini paperback, and it's about medium size, so it's going to go right in the middle next to the Enchanted Map and the book for astrological oracle cards. Not because of any theme, but because that's the size it fits at. That's how I organize my bookshelf, according to size. I usually, if I have enough books, I'll start with, like, on either end, really tall books and work my way towards the middle into really short books. Once I've got the basic shape down on a given bookshelf, and given I've selected the books for that shelf, given overall theme, or unit, or some sort of thing that ties it together. Then I go through and do a visual check of like, do I want any particular books sitting next to each other, etc. Do some belong to each other because they're sequels, etc. I do that. So I do somewhat similar. I haven't actually finished the bookshelf yet, but they're up and they are holding things. And I don't know if I'll share a picture of the bookshelf in its current state, but when it's finally complete and fully displaying things in a way that makes sense and that I will find useful, then I will post a photo. But cool, let's get into this deck. I'm taking off that delightful little paper band that comes with some of them instead of the plastic, inner shrink wrap. Those I just put in the box. Oops, top of the box, bottom of the box. There we go. And they stay in there and rattle around forever. I do the same thing with the boxes, the size sorting. The very first card that you could see when you open the deck has in bright gold glitter "Wake Up Call," and that's the front of the card. That's the text of the card. The back of the card has got the golden swirly graphic design grill thing that is on the cover. And this one's gonna fit over there somewhere, yeah, but I don't have a spot for it yet, so I'm gonna put it on the very top. I've got to redo that bookshelf. I might do that today. Okay, so like with the last deck, I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick shuffle. And when I don't ask a question out loud, for anybody who's wondering, like, what did he ask? What was the question? What am I supposed to be? What is this guy supposed to be patient about? Or what are we supposed to be patient about? Unofficially, whenever I do a card reading and I didn't overtly ask a question, not unofficially, I guess officially, I guess to let you know, in my mind, when I do that, I've generally got the prompt that expresses a prompt, not the prompt. It isn't like some exclusive thing. I've got a thought in my head that essentially is, I welcome whatever guidance that you, the deck that I'm working with in my hands, think is best for me as my next step, or what you think I need now. So for right now, to give it a more formal thing, like I'm as a first question for this deck, I really should do my acting theater warm-up exercises before hitting record instead of in the middle of it, right? I'll just say it to the deck instead of saying it to you, audience. Hello, deck. Thank you for joining this family of Oracle system. And as an initial introduction, I welcome whatever card you'd like to share with me that you think is important guidance for me now or during my next step, whatever that is. Too wordy. Eventually I'll get a nice, clean, easy to rattle off, easy to remember version of that. I may have used something. I know I did a whole episode a while back, and I cannot recall for the life of me at this second if I posted it, or if it's sitting in a pile somewhere, or if I lost it. But I recorded an episode. A whole bunch of cards just fell out. Like a bunch. Let's not look at the front yet. One, they're still kind of clumping together a little bit, even though they're not plastic coated. These have got a nice, what's the word? Not satiny, like a matte coat feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards just popped out. Let's look at them in the order they came up, having set them down face up because they landed face up. If they had landed face down, I would start dealing them out face down from the top of that little stack. But since they landed face up, I'm going to deal them face up. That gives me an order. This one's going to go first. So the first one that landed face up in that little clump that fell out together says, "Live your soul, not a role." Card 2 says, "Do what you love." Card 3 says, "Admit your vulnerabilities." Card 4 says, "Reassess." Card 5 says, "Do something different." And card 6 says, "Do all things in moderation." Interesting. Very interesting. There seems to be that seems to make sense. It almost builds a cohesive, rational sentence. So I kind of like that about decks that are very wordy, as opposed to decks that are very like, here's an image, and now you've got to look up the words. Here, the imagery is texture, right? It's background. It's a vignette, and some of it is abstract, and some of it is like figurative or literal. For example, "Do What You Love." It's got a romantic, swirly, heart red font, and it's put on a photo of a romantic, sort of nostalgic, ageless, timeless photo. You can't tell what era it is taken in, but it feels both modern and antique. But it's of the Eiffel Tower from relatively close. It's taken at ground level, presumably at whatever square or plaza that's immediately surrounding the tower. And in the front, very blurred and dynamic motion, is a pair of people very far apart from each other, but holding hands like they might be dancing. It's pretty cool. But other images, and you'll see, I'm taking a picture. You will see it's going to include the podcast just for funs and giggles. You'll see that other cards in this deck have just geometric abstractions, right? Like reassess is all tonal brushstrokes in the color palette of the deck. Do something different has got a background, a linear background, which is brushstrokes of two colors overlapping, and then a block print to give it like a here is an object inside this image, and then the text is floating over a golden sparkle paint heart. And these don't look as cheesy as they might sound in the description. But let's talk about the reading itself. Live your soul, not a role. Do what you love. Admit your vulnerabilities. Reassess. Do something different. Do all things in moderation. Each of them is pretty sound advice. And I bet if I went into the little white book, which is not white, right? It's full color. Well, the text inside is all white, but the cover is a full color cover. I bet there's a nice, lovely, in-depth reading we can do, but we'll hold off on that for now because we're already at our limits. 42:20. Right then, so we'll go ahead and just let that simmer. But I'll wrap this episode up with a sort of extemporaneous, off-the-cuff interpretation of that, and we'll start with the end. Do all things in moderation. Given that's like the final statement in the paragraph that we've just assembled, it must apply even to the very first statement. Live your soul, not a role, right? So in moderation. That's really, really wise advice, because this is like by itself, live your soul, not a role, can be seen as a one or the other, but not both kind of a situation, right? And what are roles? Well, they can be unhealthy for sure. They can be toxic, and they can be hijacked. Roles that we play in our society can totally be hijacked to be systems of control, oppression, and manipulation, right? But we have to play many of them. In fact, our world that we've created, our world of ideas and politics and societal constructs, they require us to be tax accountants. The system requires us, or very strongly asserts the need for many of us to be doctors, to be parents, to be politicians, to be etc. And thus, many of us misguidedly believe that the role or roles that we are playing are themselves the life we are living. So if we balance the two, we can't just live 100% pure soul, right? We would be deluding ourselves, I think. There was an interesting article that at first got me a little worked up and had my hackles up, because it said the title was something like the illusions or the lies of enlightenment, or the something about that. It was very dismissive. And then the hook line underneath was the delusions and lies you tell yourself. ... And so I'm like, wait a minute. Is this an article saying that enlightenment is completely fake and that we're all wasting our time. So I had to open it up. And it was fairly balanced and equitable. And it was its strongest point that I picked up from my initial scan was that, yes, you can achieve profound states of mind, and those can be enlightened and awake, etc. And also, I just cut the deck and took a sneak peek at another one and said, look forward. I'm like, okay, you're right. I need to stay on task. The article was not trying to outright debunk enlightenment as a theory. It was reminding everyone that we are still humans, right? Like Einstein says something similar. The universe is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. This article was reminding us we still live in this body. It still does things and needs things and implements urges that may or may not comply with societal norms, with, and then we have to take responsibility for that. That if we're going to live according to societal norms, then we have to hold ourselves accountable and deal with the body urge, the impulsive things that are neither our mind nor our soul. Ultimately, though, with this article, and I have to go back and do a deeper read, I'll admit I was kind of like scanning through it just to get a sense of the overall direction. But from what that scan, that overview lacked, in my mind, was an acknowledgement that in all theories of this nature, and arguably this facet of the theories could be malarkey, right? But in all of them, there is this very serious statement that there is somewhere else to be, and that somewhere else is right here and right now, that there are other levels that we could be operating at. And just like, a child outgrowing a pair of pants, I think that once we achieve fully and really get rooted and established and completely acclimated, not as individuals, but as a species in this higher order of operation, in this other dimensional existence, that we are not disconnected from. It is right here and right now and within us, but we are blocked off from it, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, imagine the way in which our practical, pragmatic world would change and be improved and maybe even upgraded in ways we can't anticipate if every human living individual, from the moment they're born, intuitively, without instruction, without being programmed to or forced to, honored, recognized, could perceive directly and know how to interpret and understand and cope with the reality that one's own shim or higher self or spirit or light is the same. Not just equal to, but the same, literally, in all other individuals. As my favorite meme and mantra says, to paraphrase, our crisis, because we always live in crisis, no matter what era you pick, make America great again. You go, show me what era in which people weren't bitching and moaning about how things could get better. Huh? When was it perfectly great? It never was. That's an illusion. That's a lie. But so our crisis is not a political one. It never has been, nor a social one, nor an economic one. Our crisis is a crisis of consciousness, an inability to recognize, honor, deal, and directly perceive our own shim, to paraphrase and insert that word into that mantra, and to see that shim in all others, to see that spirit in all others. Doing what we love nurtures our inner child, which is like a biological fractal of, a psychological, emotional fractal iteration or version of the shim, right? Doing what we love feeds the soul on all the levels, and we want to live our soul, right? Not the role. We want to be responsible and accountable for the role, and we want to see if we can't integrate that role, like trying to tie the whole phrasing together, integrate that role into or to include that which we love. In doing so, we must admit our vulnerabilities, because if we don't confront those, that's where ego gets in. That's where ego, steps into our mental, emotional space and can lay the traps that hijack us. Whenever we admit our vulnerabilities, we must then reassess, which is a form of processing, right? And whenever we work towards something, whenever we are doing what we love, whenever we're trying to live a balance of the roles that are imposed on us by society and our soul's needs, we must never blindly barrel through it without some form of contemplative review. Now, there is a danger in all things, right? That's what's inherent in the warning of do all things in moderation. Do not, my friends, develop the habit and build up the muscles of overthinking. Overthinking is contingent and built upon being unable to judge, right? So you feel incapable of judging, so you go around in circles and you overthink. And then you try to judge a situation or what's the word I'm looking for? You try to judge a situation or a context or a development, and then you judge it, and then you question your judgment, and then you go back around in the loop. Healthy reassessing or reassessment or review, in my opinion, and I don't know what it says in the explanatory text here, I haven't read it yet, but in my opinion, reassessing is done contemplatively, is done in a state of meditative being. You meditate first, and then you engage the intellect, right? You meditate first to calm that intellect's hustle, to chill it the fuck out and let it connect and ground and heal and go, yeah, okay, cool. I don't need to run around in the little rat wheel, the hamster cage. I can just connect and be grounded and speak with clarity. The next thing, do something different, which has been a theme actually not too long ago in the last 48 hours on my Tarot app, which I've had installed for quite a while. I've been using this app since before this particular device. But I guess it's sort of I don't know how smart of an algorithm it has, but if you stop using it, it gives you alerts, and tries to give you a daily card alert, and then it stops giving you alerts. It stopped giving me alerts. I wasn't checking them. I was dismissing the alerts. And then I opened it, and then boom, the next day, daily draw alert. And so it was neat. I'd forgotten that I had that app there for a hot minute, and I really like that app. I opened it because I was reading from it to a friend / collaborator / fellow student of Tarot who reads for me on occasion and who I have read for, on less often, but I should do some more readings. We should read for each other in exchange more often. But what's my point? Oh yeah, I recently got it pulled for me in whatever way it decides which card to present to you at random from the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the Hanging Man, reversed. And in its explanatory text, this app points out the Hanging Man reversed can show up when your behavioral pattern or your lifestyle is not in complete congruity or in alignment with your identified spiritual practice or your spirituality. Do all things in moderation. I think we always struggle with that, right? And doing something different. It's easy to get caught in a rut. This whole journey that I'm on, that I'm sharing with you guys through these various lenses, began because I was stuck in a rut and I needed to do something different. And I've gone through levels of being stuck in ruddy places and not being able to do something different. But today, lo and behold, I've done something that I've often sort of visualized and said, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to get up, I'm going to meditate, a nice, quick, easy, breezy, just sort of center myself meditation in the morning, make my cup of coffee, smoke my one daily, not attributed, what's the word? Not sanctioned, rationed, my one rationed cigarette in the morning, which is, an objective I'm trying to get to, as for those of you who don't know, I've never claimed to be a yogi and or vegetarian or be super healthy. I'm just your average Joe Schmo that was, going through rough times and decided to go, oh, right, I'm a spiritual person. I should maybe really be spiritual. I should maybe do spiritual things. And it reminds, the reminder to do all things in moderation. That includes our spirituality, friends, because we can get sidestepped or sidetracked into an egoic version of our own spiritual activities. We can get seduced by the ego facet of our being, which is phenomenologically embedded within us, along with the light. There is always the dark, or else how do you perceive either? And it's always trying to seduce us, right? And so you got to watch out for that. Always be vigilant, and always do things in moderation, including the vigilance. Sometimes you got to put your, ease your guard down and just go with the flow and be prepared to, to not be so uptight about things. So balance. Anyways, thank you, Deck. That was a beautiful, interesting first reading. And it came about as a perfect example of when cards jump, which is, I could do a whole episode. Someday when I recap a bunch of these episodes I'm finally creating and posting, there will probably be like a different review or recap episodes where I'm having trouble getting this deck in its new sleevey pouch. And sometimes you gotta split the deck up or else it just won't all go in. So I just did a portion. I'm going to do it in thirds. It'll be nice and easy. This is going to be a tight fit. I wish, speaking of manufacturers, and I called out, I have been calling out manufacturers of things who I don't know, and I don't have, that's the one bit of oh, there wasn't a card to put in here. Oh yeah, this deck just barely fits in there, man. That's rough. I wish this manufacturer, whoever makes these awesome, and I wish, well, they're almost awesome. They're made out of plastic, I'm fairly certain, which makes them strong and durable. And what makes them cool to me is that they're strong and durable, but they're totally see-through. They're like a woven, that's the grain of the plastic thread, as it's very taut against this deck. But they're flexible, they're sturdy, they're strong. And so far, even the biggest decks that barely fit have been contained well by them. Okay. That was today's episode of the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's Tarot Journal. Why did I make that awkward sound? I'm going to have to cut that out later. Okay, thank you for joining me in this random ramble. I'm very excited for the next recording. The next one, if I do only one deck, it will be Buddha Wisdom and Shakti Power, Deck and Guidebook by Laura Santee. The art of which looks phenomenal, beautiful, very traditional, and yet, contemporary. So, looking forward to that. If I turn it into a double whammy, then I will also unbox the Alana Fairchild Rumi Oracle, which I'm sure is bound to be quite beautiful as well. But until next time, thank you for joining me. Namaste. May peace, love, and grooviness be with you. And let's talk again soon.